In this lesson, we'll learn how to paint using Illustrator's Blob brush. Alright, so in the previous lesson, we were working with the paintbrush tool, and we were painting with paths, essentially, applying brush strokes to those paths. Now, I'd like to go ahead and show you a little different type of tool for painting in Illustrator, and in fact, I actually used it to create some of the files we've got here on our screen, and we used in the last lesson. Let's go ahead and look in our tool panel over here to the left, and you're going to see the Blob brush right here. Now, the keyboard shortcut to activate the Blob brush is Shift-B. Now, there are some options for the Blob brush, but let's talk about what the Blob brush does differently than the paintbrush tool. Whereas the paintbrush tool paints using a path, the Blob brush is actually going to paint using a filled, closed shape. We're going to take a closer look at that here in just a moment, but let's go ahead and take a look at the tool options here. I'm going to go ahead and double click on our Blob brush, and several of these options should look familiar to you. We've actually seen several of these in tools in previous lessons, but let's go ahead and just run through these here. We've got our tolerances again. We've got a fidelity slider and a smoothness slider. Again, the fidelity slider, the lower it is going to get the more anchor points it's going to give us. The higher it is, the fewer anchor points we're going to get. The smoothness slider affects how much Illustrator tries to smooth out exactly what you paint. So how it tries to correct what you paint. So if you want it to be more accurate and true to the paths that you draw on your tablet, then leave this slider lower down. If you want Illustrator to correct those and really smooth those out, go ahead and raise that up some and test that out. So again, we have some brush options, and these sort of look similar to the calligraphic brush that we looked at a couple lessons ago. Now we have a brush tip shape here, so if we want to create more of a calligraphic feel, we can actually pinch in our brush tip shape, and we can rotate it as well. So you can see here the angle and the roundness are being adjusted as we adjust this tip shape. Now, again, we've got a size slider here, and we can change any of these to be based on some of the same things that we've had previously: random, pressure, stylus wheel, so on and so forth here. Now, we've got a couple other options up here which are sort of new. We have a Keep Selected box, and we have a Merge Only with Selection. So basically, the Keep Selected option is going to keep anything you paint with the Blob brush selected after you finish painting it. If you don't have this checked, it's going to deselect it automatically. Now, a cool thing about the Blob brush is that if you paint one shape with one color, and then you go to paint another shape with that same color, you can actually merge those two shapes just simply by painting them together. So this Merge Only with Selection option is going to merge what you paint only with items that you have selected instead of anything of the same color. We'll take a closer look at this here in just a minute when we explore how this tool works, but let me go ahead and hit OK on this dialog for right now. Actually, let's go ahead and hit Cancel. We'll just take the default settings. And let's just move over here to the scratch area, and I actually use the Blob brush to create these little trees. Let's just go ahead and zoom in here on one of these. Alright, so let me go ahead and grab my selection tool, and let's just zoom in and sort of pull this tree apart and look how it was built. Now, we've got several different shapes here that have been painted in with the Blob brush and layered on top of each other. Remember how we talked earlier about Illustrator having a stacking order? I have these lighter green shapes on top of our sort of medium value green shape here, and then I have a darker green shape behind that. In between this shape and this darker green shape, though, I have all these bark colored or trunk colored shapes that I've painted in. So you can see here that really all these are just individual shapes that I've painted in. Let me just go ahead and undo those moves here, and I'll go ahead and paint some things with this Blob brush and show you how it works. Alright, so in order to set the color for our Blob brush, we need to actually assign that color as a stroke color here. Now, I know that it's kind of strange that the Blob brush actually paints filled shapes. If we go ahead and hold down our Control modifier key and just select one of these shapes, you can see that it's a shape with a brown fill to it. But let's go ahead and maybe switch this fill over to a stroke just to paint with the Blob brush. So I'm going to go ahead and paint here. And you can see that basically we're just painting into the computer. Now, Illustrator did smooth that out just a little bit. Let's take a look at my smoothing settings. Maybe I have that turned up just a little. No, I actually don't. We just have a little bit of fidelity, but it's down as low as it's going to get. I tell you what, let's go ahead and turn on this Keep Selected option here, and let's tweak our brush tip some. I'm going to go ahead and pinch it in a little bit, give it more of a calligraphic feel, and I tell you what, let's go ahead and set the size to be based on pin pressure. And we'll pull that variation slider. Let's go ahead and just set it at about 5. And hit OK. Now I like to use these settings to create more of a painterly feel as I'm working, because using the pressure sensitivity on my tablet, I can lightly paint, or I can paint with a little more heavy of a hand and get a thicker stroke. Let me just show you here. I'm going to start with a really light stroke here, and then press harder, and we can get even thicker. So, and again, you can see we're painting a filled shape. So let's just go ahead and select those two and delete those here. Now, we can actually increase and decrease the size of our blob brush tip by using the open and closed bracket on our keyboard. So those are a couple keyboard shortcuts for you that are very, very handy. If you've ever used Photoshop, Photoshop uses the same two keyboard shortcuts to increase and decrease its brush sizes. But let's go ahead and just reduce that down here again. And let's see what happens if we paint back over into this shape. We're going to paint over here like this. And let's just touch our new shape to our existing shape. And you can see here that because we touched those two shapes and they're the same color, we've merged those two shapes. But let's go ahead and select a different color here. I'm going to go ahead and just pick this medium value green here and then deselect this. So we've got that set as our fill color. Let's switch it over to our stroke color here, and let's paint this color on top of this brown color. So you can see here that because we have a new color selected, it's not merging the new shape. It's actually just painting it on top of this existing shape. So pretty cool. Now, I will go ahead and warn you, if you get too many shapes stacked on top of each other here in your stacking order, it may be difficult to merge shapes. I tell you what, let's just go ahead and take a look at how that would work. Let's go ahead and add another shape to this stacking order here. We'll just pull in a lighter green shape, and let's go ahead and, at this point, let's go ahead and select this brown shape right here. And let's go ahead and try and add to it right in this area. You can see here it didn't work. We had that shape selected, but we've drawn a new shape here. That's because there are two shapes in between these two in the stacking order. So keep in mind that if you're trying to merge shapes, they have to be next to each other, either in front of or behind in the stacking order. And again, remember, we can change our stacking order simply by coming up to Object, Arrange, and moving either to the front, forward, to the back, or backwards here. And again, there's those keyboard shortcuts that I use so often in order to rearrange things, whether it be on my artboard or in the scratch area. So let me just deselect that. Alright, so that is Illustrator's Blob Brush. Really one of my favorite tools for painting right into Illustrator. Really feels like you're using actual paint on a canvas to me. So in the next lesson, we're going to continue on talking about Illustrator and learn how we can erase both objects and paths.